We'll be looking at a controversial goal-scoring winger in today's episode. The prospect spotlight is on Cole Eiserman for this episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be looking at Cole Eiserman's game under the spotlight here. We'll take a look at the puck skills, the profile first and foremost. In our first segment, kind of break down what his strengths are skill-wise. In our second segment, we'll look at the toolkit, the habits, the decision-making, all the kind of more intricate stuff in Eiserman's game. And then in our third segment, we'll give our NHL projection, what the upside is, what the likelihood of him reaching that upside is, and which team would be the best fit for Cole Eiserman. But before I get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started here with Cole Eiserman. Give me the profile with Eiserman, size, handedness, where he plays, all that good stuff. We'll start off with that.
For sure. So Cole Eiserman is a 6 foot, 196-pound left shot left winger who is one of the youngest players in this entire draft class. He's just about 2 weeks shy of being eligible for the 2025 class. And his production this season, especially in the goal scoring department, has been incredible. In 20 USHL games, he's logged 24 goals and 31 points. So 24 goal to 7 assists split can give you a bit of an idea of how he plays on the ice. And overall in the NTDP in 45 games this season, he's gotten 48 goals and 73 points. The production's been excellent. He's been playing with some really high-quality line mates throughout the season, whether it be players like Teddy Stiga, who's a pretty pacey playmaker, or even James Higgins, who's likely going to be the first overall selection in that 2025 draft class. And Eiserman is a tremendous goal scorer. As far as the goal scoring is concerned, he is top in this draft class, and only Macklin Celebrini comes close. And that is to do with a lot of different aspects of that goal scoring toolkit, whether it be the release itself or the off-puck movement, as we're going to dig into in this episode. But there's a lot of questions beyond that. So let's jump straight into it with the main tool itself. This is the highlight of his overall toolkit and the reason that whichever NHL team is going to go up onto the podium to call his name will be picking him, the goal scoring. What makes it so special?
Yeah, for me, the goal scoring is a 9.5. It's the best goal scoring tool. It's the best shot in the draft for sure. I mean, there's a decent margin for me between him and Celebrini, and I love Celebrini's shot, but there's a significant gap there, and it really has to do with the mechanics. Eiserman is not only powerful, but mechanically really sound in his shot. The way that he transfers his weight, the way that he activates his top hand in that movement. He's always kind of using that leverage and that torque in his body in order to create that shot. So it's a great element of his game that, really makes him stand out. So yeah, 9.5 for me, and it's uplifted as well by the off-puck movement, as you mentioned. And we'll get into that in our second segment, kind of describe that a bit more in detail, because it's a really good tool in this game. But yeah, for me, there's a definite standout in the goal-scoring ability. In terms of the stick handling, though, how do you rate that?
Yeah, the stick handling's been interesting because there are a couple components of it that I think are very strong, especially his ability to catch pucks, even when they're a little bit awkward to handle, if they're really hard passes or slightly inaccurate. His catch and release is ridiculously good. He can catch pucks so well and immediately blend that into an immediate shooting movement. So that is a big strength. In terms of his actual puck handling ability when he's carrying the puck, I think he's a lot more limited. He doesn't really use his unlocked top hand very effectively as a puck handler, even though he's shown in flashes that he can play with that unlocked top hand. So I think as a whole, I'd give the handling maybe a 5, but there's a big gap between like the 7.5 tool that is the actual ability to catch pucks, and like maybe the 3.5 tool that is the actual puck carry and moving forward, in my estimation.
Yeah, for sure. And the big standout for me is how he blends his puck catching ability into his shot. He's got one of the best puck catch and releases I've seen in a long while. He can move his feet really well to get the puck right in his wheelhouse when he's going for a one timer. So even if the pass is off, he can adjust really quickly and get that release off. So yeah, he's got a really good understanding of how to handle pucks and how to take them into a shooting position. But you're right. Once it comes to carrying pucks in transition, deking through opponents, protecting pucks on his backhand, that kind of stuff, it gets a bit inconsistent for me. But the playmaking ability, I mean, for me, the big issue with the playmaking ability, the passing especially, is Eiserman's a really inconsistent player when it comes to this. There are flashes that I've seen from Eiserman passing wise that have really made me impressed. Given goes, smart passes lifted across lanes, hook passes, slip passes. There's a versatility to his passing game that's pretty interesting. But his usage and his understanding of when to use which pass is the main issue for me. And that's what makes it so inconsistent. He's often sometimes he'll try to hook a pass under a stick when the right play is to play an area pass into the space in front of his receiver to make sure that he has space to play into, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, the passing ability for me in flashes is a 7. But due to the lack of consistency and the lack of good decision making as to when to select which pass, I think it gives him a 5 for me as well. So average stick handling and passing. But again, the shot is just out of this world. It's one of the best shots I've ever scouted. It's not on the level of Connor Bedard's, which got a 10 for MS last year, but it's pretty darn close. It's a really, really good release and a versatile one as well. I mean, like I said, catch and release, curl and drag, one timer. Even on the backhand, he's able to roof it up top. There are some decent goal scoring tools there. And there's a significant gap between his goal scoring ability and the rest of his tools. Wouldn't you agree?
For sure. Like I fully agree with that. I think one more like limiting aspect with the playmaking game specifically is that his scanning habits, apart from his off puck play in the offensive zone, whether that be his on puck scanning habits or his defensive scanning habits, are a real area of weakness in the viewings that I've caught so far this season. Just very much can have like the blinders on and have one single idea of what he wants to do with the puck, and he just goes for that specifically rather than looking for different ways to adapt to the situation, whether he's being pressured in a way that he's not expecting. The adaptability there on puck is a bit limited. So I think that the lack of scanning habits is also a big component in that inconsistency in the playmaking game, just because when he's pressured and he is thinking shot, he's going to shoot the puck no matter what.
Yeah, and he's also not even going to look for the pass. There are many
No.
moments this year I've seen from Eiserman where he's skating into the offensive zone on a 2-on-1. He's got the puck. He doesn't even look towards his teammate. And I'm thinking there's a second where I'm thinking maybe he's looking off his pass and trying to fool the defenseman in front of him into thinking that he's going to shoot and then pass it. Nope, he just doesn't. And you can tell a lot of the time, in offensive transition situations, you can tell by the time he gets to the red line what he's going to do, and it's going to be a shot 99% of the time. It gets repetitive and predictable, and I think the main thing that has made that has made the best goal scorers in the NHL work at that level is the lack of predictability. Other than Alex Ovechkin, I can't name you a player that has a formula this strict that ends up working well at the NHL level, and it's just because Ovechkin's unstoppable. His shot is the best we've ever seen, really. I don't think there's a better shot in the history of the NHL, and he can get away with that. Eiserman's not at that level. So I think that'll limit him fairly well. But to end things off, I also want to talk about the skating real quick. It gets a 5.5 from me. I think the skating ability has some decent variety to it. I think that, he's not a player who's going to blow past you in transition. He's not a player that's going to accelerate, better than anyone else. But I like the way he uses bursts, especially in the offensive zone. He kind of he's never really kind of going at full speed the whole time, but he's really good at accelerating at just the right time in order to create separation in the offensive zone. So that's also a separating factor for me. But yeah, the mechanics are average. It's just the usage of his skating that's really interesting to me. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll get into our second, where we talk about the more intricate elements of Eiserman's game, the toolkit, the habits, the decision making, all that good stuff's coming up right after these messages from our sponsors over at Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. So give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're looking to hire, Indeed is the best place to get that done because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And it's the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. One of the things I love about Indeed, I've used Indeed in order to find my day job, and it was really user friendly, really easy to use, and there's no surprises, nothing's hidden. You know up front what the salary ranges are, and you know exactly what the job asks of you, so you can see how that matches with your strengths and weaknesses. And Indeed makes it really easy to hire great talent. According to ComScore, Indeed is the number one job site worldwide. So start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job posts at indeed.com/locked on. This offer is valid through March 31st. That's indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Alrighty, so moving on to the toolkit, the habits, the decision making, all the more intricate kind of. I would call this the mental aspect segment of our prospect spotlights, right? So, I think we can start off with the toolkit. How do Eiserman's tools interact, in your opinion? Let's start with the good ways that they interact. What would you say is a good way that Eiserman's tools kind of interact between each other?
For sure. Like I think we already prefaced this a little bit in that first segment, but I think the way that his handling, goal scoring, and physicality interact is quite intriguing. He's really able to drive the net in flashes. It's not been the most consistent of tools, but when he's on his game, he can drive the net very effectively and lower the shoulder, force his way to the net front, and really use his quick release as well as his ability to catch pucks that are difficult to catch in those tight areas while he's being marked, when he's in close to the goal and gets the elevation needed to get it over a goalie's shoulder. So there are
Yeah.
flashes of real brilliance of how those tools interact. But again, it's the consistency of that has really left a lot of room for questions throughout this season. But those are some really intriguing aspects in the ways that his tools interact.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely on that element. I also do want to focus on some ways that it doesn't really work out well for him. I think the combination of kind of average and slightly above average skating, and the fact that he uses it mainly to create for himself offensively, in terms of finding pockets to shoot from, that combined with the lack of good decision making when it comes to deciding which pass to make, I think is the main setback for me in his playmaking game. I think both his skating and his stick handling, his both his skating and his passing in isolation are fine, but how they combine for me, there's a huge lacking there, and that's one area that I'd like to see improve in this game. And I mean, I guess now we can get into the decision making elements because I think this is really the main setback in Eiserman's game and the thing that really keeps him outside of both of our top tens, right?
For sure. Like there's definitely a lot of questions along those lines, and I think a lot of it also comes down to his struggles to adapt to line mates. He doesn't really change his style depending on who he's playing with or playing against. He has his one like big tool, and he does everything in his power to leverage that in every situation that he has the puck in the offensive zone. But he struggles to adapt to his line mates, whether it be to create space for them. Like, for instance, when he's playing with a player like James Higgins, to create space for Higgins to operate in and to use his physicality to push defenses back and to use his shooting threat to create that space for his line mates. And a lot of the decision making is around like optimizing his own chances of getting the puck onto the net. And I think that there's quite a few limitations in that facet.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other element of that is that, when you look at Iserman, he's been playing all over the roster with the NTDP this season. He's played with Higgins on the top line. He's played on the second line with the likes of Max Plant and Camille Bednarik a lot. of the times as well. He's played with Teddy Stiga, some of the other, Hagen Burrows, those kind of guys. He's played with a bunch of different players this season, and at no point did I ever feel like he was changing his approach to the game. Like it's always the same approach that he has, and the best goal scorers are able to adapt. Connor Bedard, I mean, what's made him work this season is that he's a highly adaptable player. He's a player who knows who he's playing with and knows how to play off of them. Eiserman, I feel like sometimes it seems like he expects his teammates to adapt to him rather than the opposite. Going from playing with James Higgins to playing with Max Plant as your playmaker, there's a big gap there in terms of skill set, in terms of abilities. And yeah, there are ways to adapt and work around that in order to uplift a player like Max Plant, because Plant is a fantastic playmaker, right? So, being able to offer him off puck support in ways that are meaningful. I mean, with Higgins, you don't really need to work on that much. You can just do whatever and he'll find you. With Plant, though, you need to offer him off puck support. You need to offer him a clear lane between you and him for you to receive the puck. And I haven't really seen Eiserman adapt his play that way. We can also talk about the defensive issues, because I think it's really a habits thing, because he has the strength, he has the energy offensively in order to get things done, but there's a total lack for me of engagement. I don't think it's a lack of effort. I think it's a lack of engagement with Eiserman, right?
For sure. I watched a couple games today, and honestly, the most consistent element throughout those viewings with Cole Eiserman was that in the defensive zone, he plants himself in one spot and watches the puck go around and around and around. He very rarely gets involved, whether it be with a stick check or using his physicality, or even just applying pressure in any way, or getting into passing lanes. There's a real disengagement in the defensive zone, and that also correlates to his disengagement on the forecheck and on the back check. Like, whenever his team doesn't have the puck, I'm not quite sure exactly where the crux of the issue is with it, beyond just the lack of engagement. But I've not really caught a single viewing this season where Cole Eiserman could be noted down as being engaged defensively in any of the three zones.
Yeah, and engage off the puck period, I think, is a main issue. Like, there's a way to approach things that really helps you create more for yourself. And I think that once Eiserman figures that out, if he does, which is a pretty big if, because these are the types of things that it requires a lot of mental rewiring when a player is this bad at something in order to kind of turn it into such a good thing, or at least even an NHL average thing. But if that gets done, I feel like Eiserman could very well, kind of bloom into a really good player, because when he is engaged, which is rare, but when he is engaged, the stick work is good, the ability to muscle off opponents is good. He leverages his weight fairly well, but he's just not doing it, which is highly concerning, because if you're not doing it at the NTDP level, it's going to be even tougher to start doing it at the NCAA level, let alone the AHL or the NHL level. So it's just, how does he climb the ranks is a question for me. Other than that, in terms of the decision making on the puck, I think we both have different reads on this, but I think the crux of it is the same: is that when it's bad, it is bad, right?
Yeah, when it's bad, it's like coach going gray in about 3 seconds type of bad. And
Yeah.
I think you've caught more viewings this season that give you more reason for optimism. Like, I've caught, like, I think 7 or 8 games of his so far this year, and I can't say that a single one of them had extended sequences of like calculated on puck decision making. But I saw a bit more of it last season. Like, in some D-1 tape, I did see a higher level of like off puck engagement in the offensive zone, in terms of being able to support play off puck, in terms of using his off puck movement and ability to find pockets of space for any reason other than getting shots off immediately. And this season, that's been a bit more lacking in my views, but you've watched more of him than I have. So it's not that I'm writing him off completely here. And of course, like, he's one of the youngest players in this entire draft class. Like, of all the players to have like fundamental issues in decision making, it makes sense that's one of the younger players in the class. And the offensive and overall physical tools are really, really impressive. So I can totally understand why some teams are going to be super enticed to pick him in the top 10, top 15. I just don't think I'd personally be willing to take the risky swing that would be taking Cole Eiserman in the top 15 in my perspective. As high as the upside may be, and confident as you may be that the right development system could foster him into like a really potent 50 goal scorer on a consistent basis, I would be taking risks on other players personally and be very curious
Yeah.
to watch from a distance how Eisman progresses through the years, because I think it'll be a very good learning experience also from our perspectives as scouts, because he's so divisive, he's so inconsistent, but the strengths are so abundantly clear that it makes it a bit difficult to pin down exactly where you'd be willing to take that risk. And I think I am personally a bit more more comfortable sitting back into the observer's seat from a distance rather than taking that risk on myself.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. But that actually is up for our second segment. We'll get into our third, where we talk a bit more about the projection with Eiserman, how much, what the upside is, how likely he is to reach that upside, and how would we project him realistically to the NHL. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or on a number one seed, it's time to go dancing with America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in free bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 that you can spend on anything, ranging from spreads to money lines to single game parlays. You can even pick who you think is going to win it all. I know I personally am always a very big fan of single game parlays, especially when I'm attending a game live, because it makes the action all the more exciting. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets.
Alrighty, so moving on to our final segment, we'll talk about Cole Eiserman's projection, the upside, the floor, what the likelihood he is of reaching that upside, and which team would be the best fit for Cole Eiserman. So let's start with the upside. We already diverge on this. I really see a 50 goal score as the upside. I just don't think the likelihood is that high. But is there anything in this game do you think is preventing him upside wise of reaching 40 goals, reaching 50 goals rather?
I mean, for me, a lot of it comes down to the mental approach and also the ability to complement line mates. Like, again, it goes back to not only not struggling to adapt to his line mates, but being willing to do so and being willing to learn from their styles in order to adapt his own. In my viewings, I've just seen him so doggedly play the way that he wants to play, that that's something that, in my experience, scouting players is always a big hurdle when you jump levels, especially when you're going into a very strong college program like Boston University, where I mean, Celebrini is probably going to be an NHLer next season, but if he goes back the college route, Eiserman's not going to be the primary threat on that team. And you could even argue already that at this season in the NTDP, he's not the primary threat on his team. Like James Higgins really is that player in the NTDP program. But I would agree that the upside is that of 50 goals. Like the release is just absolutely absurd. He modeled it after Austin Matthews, and it's really quite clear how he implemented that. Like the way he's able to catch and release, to blend all of his different tools into maximizing the potency of that release from any different angle, from any like off balance position, from any position in the offensive zone. But I think you're a bit more optimistic on the likelihood than I am personally, but it, it
Yeah.
he's such a fascinating player. He's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. The thing with Eiserman that keeps nagging at the back of my head is the ability to consistently drive the net. We talked a lot about the Oliver Wahlstrom comparatives, because Oliver Wahlstrom was another NTDP forward who really relied on his shot and his off puck movement in the offensive zone to create lanes and shoot the puck and score goals. And I understand the comps because both of them have their issues defensively. Both of them are disengaged off the puck, aren't necessarily the best skaters, aren't necessarily the best passers or puck handlers. They don't have any other tools they can rely on or fall back on other than their shot. And that's why Oliver Wahlstrom hasn't developed that well, along with being in a development pipeline that didn't really favor and much strength, much development strengths and in his weaknesses, right? So it just I understand the comparisons, but for me, what Oliver Wahlstrom never has, that Cole Eiserman already has as an NHL strength, is the ability to know when, how, and at what time to drive the net. Um, Eiserman's really good at crashing the net. He's really good at jumping on rebounds. He's really good at identifying when the defense is giving him a lane and which side of the defenseman, which shoulder to lean on his way to the net. It's those small details that it's giving me a bit of pause regarding how low I would rank Eiserman. For me right now, he's at 11th overall, mainly because I still see the upside, despite all the weaknesses, despite the hair pulling elements of his game that really make it difficult for me to watch him. I still see a path to him that's a bit back to the NHL for him that's a bit clearer than Wallstrom's. So yeah, that's the kind of main separating factor for me. But I agree that there's a lot that needs to go right. I just think that the right development team could take Cole Eiserman and turn him into a 50-goal scorer who drives the net, who's money on the power play. But and they'll try to, especially if he has the right cast, right? I mean, I don't know. Let's say he's playing to the left of Nico Hischier, right? Like that's a great spot to be. That's a great spot to be as an offensive leaning player who doesn't really engage all that much defensively or off the puck. Hischier will do all that for you. All you need to do is just find the right lane and transition, stay in that lane, and be ready for a play. So, it depends on the cast and it depends on the development and the pipeline that he's in. But I would keep him away from the types of teams that are, I would keep him away from the teams that are the type to just have dinner with their prospects once a month and call it development. Like that's not how it works. And Eiserman needs a lot more than that, right?
Yeah, Eiserman's going to need a really, really, really hands-on approach from whichever team ends up picking him. And if we're starting to spitball here among NHL fits, I think like beyond the New Jersey Devils, two teams that come to mind that I think could be really excellent fits, both in terms of the players they already have in their pipelines, as well as the developmental approaches that the organizations take, would be the Anaheim Ducks and the Buffalo Sabres. Anaheim has really consistently been churning out high end players with high end tools, and really been like helping them integrate a lot healthier habits into their games to allow those high end tools to translate to the NHL game. We saw that with Pavel Mintyukov, who in his draft year was playing super chaotic hockey, extremely fun hockey, but since being drafted by Anaheim, they've really been allowing him to still take offensive risks while also being able to better notice when to take those and when to stay back defensively and how to get back defensively efficiently. So I think that Anaheim would be a really nice fit. And you mentioned this before we started recording. And with the Buffalo Sabres, all I'm thinking is Zach Benson. And I think that Zach Benson and like Matt Savoy would be a really nice, like complementary line for a player like Cole Eiserman. But what would you think here in terms of NHL fits?
Oh yeah, 100%. Buffalo would be fantastic, and Anaheim as well. I already mentioned the Devils. I think, depending on who else they have in the system, perhaps the Habs could give him a second line center or a first line center, depending on how good he progresses. That is really going to be able to kind of lean into his defensive game and allow Eiserman to shine. Whether that's Nick Suzuki in a 2C role with Eiserman at his left, that'd be great. But I mean, I'm trying to think outside of that. Like Arizona, I think could use a bit more goal scoring ability, and Eiserman could fit well in that. But I don't really know if they're the best team to develop him. All I know is keep him away from the Islanders, please and thank you. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers. Help us get there. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to leave us a rate and review. It helps the channel out a lot, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospects coverage for the month of March. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.